At Portage Community Bank, we view ourselves as neighbors serving neighbors because we live and work in the community we serve. Banking for you, our neighbors, our community, with offices in Canton, Ravenna. Portage Community Bank, FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
I'm very pleased to be here with some very distinguished guests. Our City Manager, Dave Ruller, and our Superintendent of the Kent City Schools, Dr. Joe Giancola. And what I'm going to do is kind of give you a brief overview of where we are in the budget process down in Columbus, and then kind of an overview of what is actually in the bill. So this is one of a series. I usually do a town hall meeting one a month, and I try to have it rove around the district. Since the district's fairly large, I like to be out in the different communities, and it's a good opportunity for you to learn about what we're doing down in Columbus, ask questions. The budget is about a $55 to $56 billion state budget. It's over $100 billion if you count all funds, which are some of the funds that we get in from the federal government, such as Medicaid dollars and other kind of fees and dollars we're able to draw down from the federal government. There was about a $3.1 billion cut to K through 12 education in this budget, and over a $500 million cut to higher education. About 14% was their cut. We capped tuition at universities at 3.5%, so universities in Ohio will be able to raise tuition up to 7% over the next 2 years. That was something that I was pretty outspoken about, very worried about the effect that's going to have on our young people at a time when college education is getting more and more expensive, as you all know. There was about a $1.3 billion cost shift from schools and local governments to plug other areas in the budget. There was about a $500 million cut to local governments, a $600 million cut to long-term care for Ohio seniors, and about a $250 million cut to mental health services for kind of our most vulnerable Ohioans. There's also a lot of privatizing of state resources going on in this budget. We are privatizing 6 of our state prisons. We are privatizing the sale of liquor in Ohio and directing that money to the Governor's New Jobs Ohio initiative. We've allowed in this budget drilling and timbering in our state parks and nature preserves. So that's kind of a way of using our state resources for private industry. There's language in the budget that will authorize privatizing of the Ohio Turnpike. That's something I'm especially concerned about, being that the Turnpike cuts through the 68th House District. And then there's a lot of money and kind of opening up of opportunities for charter schools. So, as we have scarce resources for our public K through 12 schools, we're kind of expanding access to charter schools, and it's a tough, scarce dollars, spreading them even further is something that gives me a lot of concern. And there's also some language in the budget to study charter universities, which is a way to privatize some of our public universities in Ohio. And some universities have indicated that they're interested in that. I know in Virginia, when that occurred, tuition skyrocketed. So I want to keep a real close eye on how we do that going forward.
So the city's been, about 5 years ago, went through a year-long budget process where we had citizens involved, and it was really quite a thing to go through. And it was an inside-outside look at everything we do and how we fund it. And so to that extent, I would argue that we were somewhat better prepared heading into the current economic challenges than many of our peer cities. I use the phrase, Kent's experience in these last couple of years has been less worse than a lot of our neighbors. So I certainly don't want people walking out here thinking we were riding a high tide, but we were not at the low tide that some of the people literally fell off a cliff. The folks that were heavily reliant on manufacturing, car industry, if you read it, every day, you read the paper of some of our neighbors. That's where the Kent State really comes into play in our economy it represents about 40% of our income tax, roughly. So that has a buffering effect on us. And we, for the most part, the typical services that you and I know is from a city level in terms of police and fire and some of the street work, and I'm going to separate the water and utilities just because they kind of fund themselves through the fees. So if we just really focus on what you think of your typical city services, income tax pays for 60–65% of that. And so it's an enormous, jobs are enormously important to our well-being. And good news is Kent State is riding a bit of an upswing right now. And that has in turn helped us, again, sort of offset the lows that we've experienced. I'll share with you a couple things. In the last 25 years, only 3 times has the city's income tax receipts not had real growth. And those 3 times were 2008, 2009, 2010. So that gives you a feel for, it was a pretty serious situation. But if you've noticed, for the most part, the council's worked very hard with the staff. We've cut over $5–6 million out of our budget. I mean, we're working at probably 5–6% less people. 75% of our costs for those city services that we talked about are people costs. So, that's not something that's easy to change. We've tweaked at the corners and at the edges, and we've refined in a lot of areas, and we've done some reasonably innovative things in the world of public services, some of which you would see, some of which would be behind the scenes you'd never see, but all in the spirit of trying to contain the costs because we saw where the revenues were going. We knew we had no choice. And another good news piece of this is 15 years ago, City Council and the staff were in better situation and set money aside. We talked about setting aside the governor some money for a rainy day fund. That is, in essence, what the city did 15 years ago. And at one point, those dollars were up to, we had a bank account of about 13–14 million. It's down to around 10 now. But the good news is it was projected to be doggone nearly broke by now if it weren't for some of the initiatives that the council and the staff have been able to do. So we've hung in there. I guess the message I would say, we've hung in there. Until the governor changed the game. I say that, Kathleen mentioned there's a lot of good things happening in Kent, and there is a lot of construction going on. You've seen an abundance of that, and it's probably important to note that the majority of that work is being done through really aggressive grant programs. I mean, we've gone after stimulus dollars any chance we can. Regardless of your political perspective, whether stimulus dollars are a good thing or bad thing, we take the perspective, if it's there, someone's got to get it, let it be us. And we've really gone after it, and from the bridge project to Plum Creek, to the downtown parking, and all the things that you're kind of seeing now and having to deal with, and I grant you, there's a lot of frustrations because there's detours all over town. But remember, that's probably a good thing because, one, it's mostly funded through state and federal dollars that we've been able to access. Some local match, but we're leveraging our dollars on a 5, 6, 7 to 1 basis, so it's significant. The other piece of it is, while they're building those things, construction workers are paying income taxes. So it's temporary, but our strategy has been, we need a bridge the next couple of years until some of the downtown stuff and some of the investments that we've made really start to anchor in and create the real long-term jobs that we're all hoping for. Because in the meantime, I know where my revenues are going, down. This was going to be our bridge, and it is working. Because another piece of good news would be 11 straight months now, income tax have been coming back. So while we've had 3 straight years of net decline from about the middle part of 2010 till now, every month has gone up over the previous year. So we seem to be seeing maybe the bottom of the trough. We're on the way up. Kent State's rocking with record numbers of enrollment, so those students are spending money downtown. Faculty's still getting raises, the administration's getting raises. All those things bode well for kind of the overall picture. And then we get the curveball from the state. So now we're kind of regrouping. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do because we really don't have that much to play with. The impacts of what Kathleen's talking about really for us is mainly the local government, the intergovernmental funds, the shared monies. We usually get about $1.2 million in those funds. And the governor's proposal, if I'm not reading it incorrectly, it's across the biennium, it'll reduce that by 50%.